right, so today's plan is something that we actually did at the end of last year, and I'm sure all of you remember because it's just was that amazing of a lesson. Um, but today's plan is to review, talking about average rate of change, slope of a secant line. And hopefully, even just looking at those terms, they sound familiar to you. To start, we're going to look at a graph. Y equals x squared minus 4x minus 5. And I'm sure from last year, all of you remember how to graph a parabola, because we all need to be able to graph a parabola. Keeping in mind that we're going to be using that as well in this year, especially this year. So you can't disregard anything we talked about last year. Hopefully you kept those notes. For those of you that are new to this class and new to me, you definitely may need to come in and get extra help, given the fact that this stuff is absolutely critical, and you have less than 2 minutes a question, and you better make sure you know how to graph a parabola really fast. So to start, the question says, find the slope of the secant line between x equals 1, and then we're going to do various points. So let's just start. Obviously, it helps to have the graph. And so just to remember how this works, the y-intercept is usually the constant here. And of course, it's when x is 0. So if I was to plug 0 in for x, I'd be left with -5 as the y-intercept. To find the x-intercept, we would, of course, have to factor by plugging 0 in for y, and you end up factoring. And this is the graph. Obviously, a little sketchy, but still, you get the idea. So our goal here is to find the slope of the secant line between x equals 1 and x equals 4. So what that basically means is here's where x equals 1 crosses, and x equals 4 crosses here. And so I want the slope of that line. How do you find the slope of any line? The change in y over the change in x. Good. So we're going to subtract the y's, and of course, what is the y of this point here at 4? And it's -5. Minus the y value at 1, and the y value at 1 is -8. Over the change in x, and the change in x, of course, and you have to go in the same order. So in other words, the point 4, -5 should be 1, and then -1. So we have +3 on top, +3 on the bottom. We get a slope of 1. Any questions? Good. If you do, please make sure you write that down. This is where we want to keep our notes, especially. You'll notice that the new format of doing notes will be, you'll do an example, and off to the right, you're going to have a column where you're going to write questions as you go. So if we answer that question, then you can go back and put notes next to that question. But I would like for your notes to be set up in a certain way this year, so make sure that you did pay attention to how that format looks. Okay, so x equals 3. So now we're going to do x equals 1 and x equals 3. So x equals 3 falls right in here, and so we're going to do the slope of this line. Well, the value at 3, if you don't know exactly what that number is, you can always plug 3 into that equation. Remember, another way of looking at this is f of 3 minus f of 1 over 3 minus 1. So if you can't read from the graph what it is, you can always plug 3 into this equation. And so in this particular case, if you did that, you would end up with plugging in 3. You would have 9 minus 12, or -3. That says -8. So it must be I somehow graphed 4. Or no. I must have done something wrong here. What did I do? Okay. Oh, I didn't. I just can't follow my own graph. That was goofy. Sorry. So it is -8. Wow, that was crazy. So -8 minus a -8 over 3 minus 1. And so you get 0 over 2, which is 0. And that should make sense. I apologize for that little mess up. I don't know why I still followed with like 3.5. So that's craziness. Sorry about that. So here's where 3 falls, and of course you get that 0 slope. That should make sense to you. How about at 2? Well, of course, for 2, we've got this slope. What do you expect that slope to be? Positive, negative, 0? Hopefully you're saying negative. And we have 2 here, so it looks to me like that's 2, -9. So I've got -9 minus a -8 over 2 minus 1. And so in this case, we have -1 over 1, and so I get -1. As you should expect, you get -1. Now, what happens when you get a? Well, the process isn't going to change. The process is still, we need to know the value. We need to know what a is. How did I determine what 3's value is, or what 2's value? Certainly, you could do that from looking at the graph, but if you don't, Another option is to plug it into that equation. So I would have a squared minus 4a minus 5, and that would just be the a part, minus, what was the value at 1? Negative 8 over a minus 1. So I would have a squared minus 4a, combine those two terms, so I'd have plus 3 over a minus 1. What do you think I should do next? Factor? Excellent. So I'm going to kind of hog some room here. So I'd have a and a. Well, multiply is going to be 3. 3 and 1 signs are the same, and they're both negative. What you should notice, and this should always happen, is that your a minus 1's cancel out. So a minus 3 is the slope of the secant line. All right, how about 1 plus h? To do 1 plus h, I'm going to need a little more space here, so I'm going to move that down. 1 plus h, same form. In other words, I'm going to do 1 plus h in place of x. Every place I see x, I'm going to put 1 plus h. And I have minus a negative 8 over 1 plus h minus 1. All right, we're definitely going to need some room here, so let's keep going there. Okay, so I have 1 plus h squared. We're going to multiply that out. Again, like we learned last year, let's try and keep in mind how to do that mentally. We would have 1 times 1. You'd have 1h and 1h, which makes 2h plus h squared. Now we're going to distribute that negative 4 through. So I have negative 4 minus 4h, negative 5 and minus a negative 8. Again, that's going to give you that positive 3. In the denominator, the 1's end up canceling out, leaving us with h. What do we expect to happen? Does anybody remember what happens on these every single time we're dealing with the h's? Let's see if you're right. The constants should cancel out. I should have combined those two also. Sorry about that. And so you end up with negative 2 plus h. Good? All right, let's do another one. So we have x squared minus 6x plus 10. The truth is, we really don't need the graph. The truth is, you're basically figuring out between 1 and 6 and 1 and 5 and 1 and 4 and so forth. But the slope of the secant line, whenever we do it, is the slope as you learned it back in the day when you learned slope in 7th grade. I mean, literally, back in 7th grade, you learned y minus y over x minus x. In fact, you probably had some 1s on there or some 1s and 2s just to kind of keep them in the right order. The same basic concept. It's just that our equations are a little bit more intense, and it's not quite as easy to see through just the graph. So to do this question, again, just as a reminder, it basically means f of 6 minus f of 1 over 6 minus 1. So we're going to plug 6 into our equation. In this case, we'd have 36 minus 36, which is 0, plus 10. Then when you plug 1 in there, you get 1 minus 6, which is negative 5, plus 10. Oh, my goodness. So it's y minus y over x minus x. And I get 1. Let's do 5. That would be 25 minus 30, right? So negative 5 plus 10, which is 5. Minus, when you plugged that 1 in there, you got 5 over 5 minus 1. And so you end up with 0 over 4, which is 0. When it's 4, you have 16 minus 24. 16 minus 24 is negative 8 plus 10, which is 2. Minus that 5 again. 4 minus 1, so you have negative 3 over positive 3, so you get negative 1. If we plugged x in there, you'd have x squared minus 6x plus 10. Minus that 5 over x minus 1. So again, you'd have x squared minus 6x plus 5 over x minus 1. And you're going to factor, just like we did in the previous question. I might be moving a little fast for you today, but the advantage of these videos is that you can go at your own pace. So don't hesitate to pause this or to repeat anything that I just spoke about so that you can see that in a little bit slower pace. That is the beauty of the video. Okay, and last but not least is the 1 plus h. 1 plus h, of course, forces me to do the 1 plus h squared minus 6 times 1 plus h plus 10 minus that 5 still over 1 plus h minus 1. Okay, let's multiply that guy out. I encourage you that throughout this video that you do things at your own pace, and certainly go ahead and check things out. To just simply watch me won't help you at all. And that's kind of why we're structuring this class a little differently than I have in the past, hoping that that will show you, and during the class time we can practice more together. Okay, so 1 minus 6, that's negative 5, plus 5. Cancels out as you would expect. 2h minus 6h gives me negative 4h, plus h squared over h. So I get negative 4 plus h. And that's what's happening. We'll re-examine what that really entails as we do these questions. We will re-examine how those actually look and what these mean. What does the average rate of change, and what is slope of a secant line, and what does all that mean? And when you look at average rate of change, there's a part of it that is just simply common sense. So you're figuring out the average, geometry-wise, where you're looking at it in terms of the picture of what's happening. And then there's, of course, the more, I don't know, practical way, symbolically, that we're doing this. And so geometrically, the way that you're looking up is just thinking of how it's rising and falling. And just being able to do rise over run, truth be told. Geometrically, you're looking at the slope of the secant line. That's what that rise over run actually entails. Symbolically, or rather to write it out using those lovely, you have the change in y over the change in x, rise over run, or f of b minus f of a over b minus a, where you're actually looking and plugging numbers in. So keep in mind that there are a number of ways that this could be written. If I wanted you to find the average rate of change, this is what we did yesterday, or excuse me, earlier in this class, we did this example, x squared minus 6x plus 10. And a number of ways that this could be written. See, if you look, this is saying x is between, or x is greater than or equal to 1, and it's less than or equal to 6. Or you have between 1 and 5, or 1 and 4. And remember, these square brackets mean it includes it. If it said a parentheses, then it would mean going up to that number, but not including, kind of like the open circle concept. So just if you quickly take a snapshot of this, even in your own mind, and we look back at the previous question, 1 and 6, 1 and 5, 1 and 4, 1 and x, 1 and 1 plus h is what we basically just did. And if you look, sorry, I went the wrong way. If you look, 1 and 6, 1 and 5, 1 and 4, it's the same exact question as previous example. So I just want to point out that there are a number of ways in which you can write this question, all to mean the same exact thing. Okay, that's the end of today's lesson. So feel free to look back at that if you need to.